Hello and welcome to Grimm's Frightmares. I'm your host, Joshua D. Maley, otherwise known as Grimm. You know, we've all had those moments where we think we're alone, but we get the strange sensation that we aren't. You know those moments where we catch a hint of movement outside the window or maybe in the shadows of another room. It's just our mind playing tricks, we say. Just a trick of the light, a car driving down the street. I mean, surely there's not really anything out there when that happens, right? Tonight's story comes to us from the great state of Texas, a community called McAllen. Here, in the dead of night, a young man gets that same feeling and decides to do what we all do and laugh it off. At least until it smiles back. My name is Mario. I'm 29 years old. I've always had a fairly stable head on my shoulders, and I'd like to think I've led a good life. I'm going to share an experience which has distressed me for many, many years. So far as I know, I'm not the last one to see it in its entirety. No, I don't mean a creepy clown in the sewers. I mean it, a formless thing that has for years been a source of terrible anxiety during nighttime walks, prompting me to always look over my shoulder at the slightest sound of trees swaying in the wind. It is the reason I don't go out alone at night anymore. I've spent a long time researching this thing, and I've had very little success. I lived at the time in the city of McAllen in the grand state of Texas. It was a quiet place, mostly seniors and middle-agers with some teens my age. There had never been any talk of supernatural occurrences in my neighborhood. And my particular neck of the woods could be described as run down, but it was still a nice enough place to live. Our house, a trailer really, raised up on cinder blocks and everything, was nestled into a lot near the woods. It sat protected behind a chain-link fence which we locked every night. This particular event happened on the night of May 19th, 2003, 13 years ago as of this writing. I was a freshman in high school, about 15 years old, and spent my entire week finding reasons not to do my final English project. With the due date now less than 12 hours away, I figured it was time to put up the game controller and get it done. It was after midnight, so technically it was early Monday morning when I got started. I worked diligently for about 2 hours, but as the clock approached 2 a.m., I began to feel very uneasy. Just a hint of anxiety crept up my back and kept distracting me off and on for about an hour. It slowly became unbearable as the 3 o'clock hour approached. I figured I was just stressing myself out. I'd been up this late plenty of times playing N64 with my friends or watching movies I wasn't allowed to watch. Bedtime was technically 10 p.m., but my parents rarely checked on me, so I knew when it was safe to bend the rules a bit. Whatever the source, I couldn't take the constant, creeping anxiety. I stood up, stretched, and suddenly had the feeling I was being watched. You know what that's like. You're alone. You know you're alone. But there's still the sensation of a set of eyes on you, hidden somewhere in the darkness. It occurred to me that that feeling might stem from my window. I had no curtains or window blinds, and of course my light was on to help me stay awake and work, meaning anyone standing outside could have easily seen me. I glanced over at my lone window to check for onlookers, hoping I'd find nothing and that my overactive imagination would settle down a bit. I saw nothing at first. There was no sign of anyone in the small ring of light cast by the lone street lamp outside, nor in the overflow of light from my room as it was cast upon the yard. My face was only inches away from the window, and I hunkered down to look into the darker places of the yard. I saw nothing, but a terrible feeling of dread came over me. I I did see something. Barely. It existed within my own reflection and seemed inches away from my face. In fact, I thought it was my own face at first, my own shadow or something, so I started to move and sway. My reflection followed as expected, but a shadowy shape remained behind, unmoving. I thought at first it was caused by the plants below my window, but that didn't make any sense. There was no light source to cast any kind of shadow from them. No, the shape remained there, right in front of me, as if my reflection itself were somehow casting its own static shadow. Another chill creeped up my spine, and the ambient noise in my room, the computer, my oscillating fan, my clock, all faded. Everything was silent. I stared at this shadowy shape, and one by one, in my head, I exhausted every rational explanation I could think of for it to be there. It simply stood there, humanoid in shape, a shape derived somehow from the convergence of the street light and my own room light. It wasn't a reflection, nor was it the shadow of another living being, yet it had a shadowy appearance, as if someone might walk through it and cause it to dissipate. I tried to get closer to get a better look at it. I couldn't discern any features, no hair, no skin, not even depth of form. It didn't reflect light, nor did direct light reveal any details outside of the vague shape. It was as dark could be, devoid of color, a shadow given two-dimensional form in a three-dimensional world. I struggled with what I was looking at. I gave a nervous laugh and a smile, as I always do in uncomfortable situations, to try and diffuse the tension. This thing, this shape, it smiled back. There before me was a horrendous flash of teeth, all sharply white, unnaturally white. No stains, no discoloration, no deformities. If I'd been afraid before, I was utterly terrified now. My face was extremely close to the window at that moment, and its sickening smile was all I could see. When I could bear it no longer, I tore my eyes away from the smile, and that's when I finally saw its eyes. They were a deep red, like the color of blood, with pitch-black pupils in the center. They say the eyes are a portal to the soul. Well, these eyes were empty. They were devoid of life, devoid of anything remotely human. I fell back from the window and screamed in terror. I'd never felt such raw, visceral fear before. I struggled to get up, but in my fear I could only gaze at its face, at its horrendous smile and its hellish eyes. I backed into a corner behind my bed and hid, hoping somehow that the makeshift border would shield me from its gaze. It didn't. Not really. I was out of sight, but I could still somehow feel its deep red eyes fixated on me, as if it could see through the bed. Reason fled as I trembled and shook with fear, racked with violent sobs. Finishing that English assignment seemed so trivial and unimportant now. It felt like hours passed, me hiding there behind my bed, cowering in the corner. My room, my sanctuary, deep inside my own home, felt completely unsafe. After some time, I finally gathered some courage and slowly crept out from around my bed. My window came into view, and I saw that the thing was finally gone. I stared at that window, never taking my eyes off of it as I slowly raised myself from the corner, only briefly glancing at my door so as to have an escape plan if the thing came back into view. But no, it was gone. There was no trace of it, no shape hiding in the trees or below the window. Nothing. I stood there for a few moments, pondering what I had seen. The fear began to fade. Rational thought returned. I honestly began to doubt what I had seen in the first place. Began to think that perhaps it was just all in my mind. something brought on by lack of sleep, an abundance of caffeine, and the stress of trying to complete this English assignment. Perhaps it really had just been my reflection. I sat back down in my chair, confident now that I'd just been silly. I focused on my assignment, finally finished it at about 4 a.m. As I did finally finish, I glanced back up at the window and chuckled at how foolish I had been. Oh, I'd be laughing about this for days, getting all scared of my own reflection. Yet, as my mind started to calm itself from its hard work on my English assignment, and the silence of my bedroom began to settle upon me, that same fear began to creep back in. My confidence that I had been imagining it all faded. I returned to the window and looked out. Something had occurred to me that I hadn't checked before. See, there's a small hole outside of my window, kind of an indentation in the dirt, that tends to collect rainwater and gives the appearance of a small glassy puddle after it's rained. Well, since it had rained earlier, and based on where I thought the thing had been standing, it dawned on me that there might be tracks in the mud if somebody had been there. That familiar chill creeped back as I saw the puddle was gone, or disrupted at least into a series of muddy footprints and tracks. It was kind of hard to see, even after turning out my room light and letting my eyes adjust to get a better look in the darkness. But I could make out the edges of some kind of footprints and a vague trail that led away from the window and into the grass and the darkness beyond. Prints were large, obviously not an animal, and in our community of mostly seniors, I struggled to believe it would be a neighbor spying on me. A grim realization settled in. It had really happened. Once the sun was up, I decided to venture outside to check the muddy mess and try to piece together any attributes of its form. I examined the muddy puddle and could no longer see anything resembling a set of footprints, or anything to suggest someone had been standing there. In fact, I could barely look into my window from the outside. At 5 foot 8 inches, my eyes barely saw over the window ledge. Something had been out here would have had to have stood at least 6 feet tall to be able to see in the window at all. Even taller to be able to meet my gaze from where I was inside the house. It unnerved me to be standing there where it had watched me. I choked down the flood of memories, seeing its faceless form and its awful smile. I told my mother and father about it. They assured me, of course, that I had either been dreaming or just under a lot of stress with finals and that project and everything I was trying to get done. The friends I told laughed at me. Others who heard about it through them just thought it was a flight of fancy. High school came and went, and I went on to bigger and better things. But I know now what I saw that night. Not what I saw, but that I saw something. I wasn't asleep or dreaming. I wasn't delusional or hallucinating. I've pulled countless all-nighters on watch in my career in the Navy, and even studying in college before the Navy. I never saw anything like this. I've scoured the web in the years since and haven't really found anything similar to my own story. Some things were close. Stories of shadow people, for example, although those accounts vary wildly and none of them really explained the proximity of this creature or its specific interest in staring at me or its grotesquely perfect smile. What I saw looked like a shadow, but I could sense a tangible presence as well. I don't know if it was a demon or a ghost or something else entirely, but I decided to write this account and share my story, if only to let others know, if they've ever encountered something like this, that they aren't alone. Some years later, I did hear some stories from newly arrived children in the neighborhood, young kids that either hadn't lived there or weren't really old enough when I was there. Those stories mention a shadowy figure with red eyes and a chilling white smile. There was even a mysterious string of animal deaths there that happened around the same time. According to the stories I heard, those children blamed the creature. The adults just found it to be an unfortunate curiosity and figured that some troublemaker from another neighborhood had come into our neighborhood to get his jollies, as they said. But to anyone who has seen this, nighttime is no longer a safe haven to catch fireflies or play release or hide and seek. It's a time of fear. In recent days, the children who have seen the creature left the area, so I can't even find them to talk to them further about their stories. All I know is what those have left behind have relayed to me, and they did so with a smirk of disbelief. Hopefully, somebody out there knows what this thing is and why it sometimes stalks my old neighborhood, peering into the windows of its residents. Hopefully someone can shed some light on this tale and chase away those shadows before it smiles at someone else. I hope you enjoyed tonight's tale of terror. Please be sure to hit that subscribe link so that you never miss an episode of Grimm's Frightmares. While you're at it, be sure to check out all of our past episodes and stay on the lookout for some exciting new upcoming shows we have for October 2018. Stay scary.